Tonight on Localite with John Compton, Don Campbell shares his first-hand experience of the 2009 microwave fire in Mosier, which nearly took his home. As a writer, Don relived the story of the fire in Columbia Gorge Magazine. Don also shares his work as a musician, freelancer, and author. All of this and more tonight on Localite.
So Don, you're not originally from the Gorge, and the Gorge is a part-time home for you right now. You're from Roseburg?
Roseburg, Oregon.
Okay. And when did you come up this way?
Well, I had moved to Portland to play music with the Paul DeLay Band in the early 80s, and shortly thereafter met my wife and learned of her and her parents' plans to build a home in Mosier. I didn't know Mosier from anywhere else. So it was kind of exciting to make those first couple trips up here and see the house actually under construction. That was my first brush, and that was probably 1980 with the Gorge, period. I mean, I'd maybe made a couple of driving trips through late at night, but it was exciting.
Yeah. Well, let's just actually jump right into your house.
Sure.
Because you nearly lost it in the fire in the summer of '09.
We did.
And, I mean, I saw pictures where it literally is charred right up to the house. The house didn't look like it was scathed at all, but it was literally to the house.
It was one of the scariest moments of my life. I got a call about 9:30, I think it was a Thursday night, August 29th, from a friend of mine, Jan Burkett, whom I went to high school with. And she was a resident, or is a resident of Mosier as well. And she said, "Don, your hill's on fire." I thought, oh my God. So I made a couple of quick phone calls to neighbors, then to the Mosier Fire Department, then to the Hood River Fire Department, just trying to get some information about what was going on. Couldn't reach anybody and just thought, I've got to get out there. So hopped in the car, left my wife in Portland. Lee stayed behind, at least until we got some more information. I got maybe 15 miles outside of Portland, got a phone call from my neighbor Gordy, who lives down at the bottom of the hill. He said, yeah, we don't know what's going on, but there's a big fire roaring down the hill. So I made that drive, which is normally an hour and a half.
And normally relaxing and scenic and enjoyable.
I'm white-knuckling it, and I did it in about 60 minutes.
Wow.
Maintaining all speed laws, of course, every step of the way.
Of course.
But I got to about Chicken Charlie Island just before the Mosier exit, and I could see the glow coming over the top of the hill, bright red, and that made the hair on my arm stand up even higher. So I raced up the gravel road, got to the driveway of our house, where there were two fire people, Bob Palmer from Mid-Columbia and Jim Appleton. I didn't know their names at the time, met them later, who said, yeah, the fire's about 200 yards from your house, and that's all we know. They were still in the early stages of triage, trying to figure out what was going to happen. So it was, to say the least, unsettling, and I think my anger probably rose to a level that I'm not accustomed to, and I may have said some untoward things to them, like, why aren't there trucks at my house fighting the fire? But they were, like I said, still in the early stages of triage, trying to figure out where the fire was going to go, what they needed to do, what manpower was available. They had tanker trucks parked down at the Twin Tunnels parking lot. So I said, can I go up? And they said, yeah, I guess so. They were a little hesitant, but they couldn't stop me. So I raced up the hill, grabbed my little tiny garden hose, and I'm sort of watering the dirt in front of the house.
Are you thinking, like, I'm really helping here, or was that just more of just, I had to do something?
I didn't know what to do. I turned all the lights on in the house, thinking if they needed some light to help fight the fire or something. The electrical was still on at that point.
And what time of day was this?
This by now was probably 10:30 or 11 o'clock at night, so it was dark. But about the time I got up there and turned the hose on and opened the house up, the fire came lapping up over our barn, which is on the west boundary of the property. The house is right on the Wasco County, Hood River County line on the top of a ridge, and we're a couple of miles from the microwave tower where the fire allegedly started.
And is named after,
and
right?
is named after,
yeah.
Correct. Although I still understand no one's really taken full culpability for the actual starting of the fire. But about the time that fire hit the barn, Bob Palmer and several other people arrived and said, we've got to get you off here. So I left and spent about 3 agonizing hours at the bottom of the hill, not knowing if the house was still standing. I was trying to figure out how I was going to call Lee and tell her that the house she designed for her parents had burned to the ground. I'm watching the flames just roar across that mountain. And at one point I had shot some quick video with my iPhone, and it was the oddest juxtaposition of sound. I could hear crickets, because because it was late at night, and crackling fire. So my brain couldn't handle that at all. So about 3 hours later, I'd actually done a little bit of help with Gordy at the bottom of the hill to try and get some stuff moved, or to him off the hill too. We have another neighbors, the Fagers, who live right next door, who, as far as I knew, were still up there. So I'm just kind of in a panic, just wondering, what's going to happen next.
And were they would not allow you to be back at the home, right?
Well,
they were like, you've got to stay
several
out of there.
of my neighbors stayed throughout the duration. They did not leave. They asked me to leave at one point. I don't know if I was being overly obnoxious or what. They had other equipment that was coming in. I had the opportunity to meet a gentleman named Roland Rose, and I didn't learn his name till later, but he was sort of the fire marshal in charge from the U.S. Forest Service. And there was a very defined movement of authority, as I learned throughout the weekend, which was heartening to know that there was a plan in place for how authority transferred from small local to much larger, depending on the stages that the fire was in. So I left the mountain about 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock in the morning, spent the night with my friend Jan at her house. From her house you can see our house, and we watched the whole thing move down the hill slowly.
You didn't get any sleep that night?
I've got about an hour. I was up again early as soon as I could see, drove back up there. They'd already shut off our road. Hood River Road and Proctor Road had been closed off. So it just got a little hairier as the days went on. Wasn't able to get back up to the house until I think Sunday afternoon. But I made a regular pest of myself with the state police who were blocking off the roads.
I think I probably would have done the same thing. I mean, your house up there, I've only seen pictures, but beautiful, beautiful place.
Well, I'll tell you, at about 1 o'clock in the morning, I saw a shadowy figure come down the hill, and he was doing some backlighting, burning combustible material that they didn't want to continue burning. So they sort of backlight these fires to help put them out, which is an odd concept. But he came by and said, Mr. Campbell, your house is fine. And then was gone again, off into the smoke. And I didn't know what he meant. Fine what? Partially damaged? Smoked damaged? I didn't know. So it wasn't until days later that I learned that the house had been untouched.
Which is unbelievable.
It was unbelievable.
Because I saw pictures too of the barn that's right, I don't know actually the proximity to your house, but it's pretty close,
Very
right?
close, yeah.
And it was done.
Done.
Yeah.
We have 2 pieces of molten aluminum that were basically all that was left of the barn, which we've kept and made kind of art pieces in the house, just as a constant reminder of how hot the fire was.
Yeah. Well, when we come back from the break, I want to talk to you a little bit about, you wrote about this.
I did.
And you wrote about it for Columbia Gorge Magazine, and just sort of reliving that experience again to write. I want to hear about that, so we'll talk about that when we come back. You guys, be right back. Stay with us.
Up next,
I'm sort of an inveterate note taker anyway, I think just because of my profession. So regardless of what I'm doing, even on vacation, I'll spend a couple hours a day taking notes. So I did take a few notes.